Well, and thank you very much for joining us on this beautiful first Monday of November 2025, November 3rd, 2025. How have you been? Hope you've had a wonderful start to the month. Hope you had a restful weekend. Hope you're doing well. And hope you're also, reflecting on some of the principles that we've been sharing on this program, leveraging artificial intelligence for organizational strategy here on Amoge Radio Communications. I remain your host, Tolu Omodara, saying welcome. So, as always, we're going to start by doing, a quick recap of some of the highlights of last week's episode. However, we would also enjoy you to please go to Amoge Radio Communications and subscribe to our YouTube page like we always want you to, because there's a rich bank of information, wealth of insight on broad-ranging issues from geopolitics to economics to strategy to public health, a whole range of highly insightful and evidence-based programs that you can learn a lot from, you as well as your team members. So I'm going to do highlights of some of last week's episode, but I'm also going to encourage you to please subscribe to that page, Amoge Radio Communications on YouTube, and to enjoy others to subscribe to. So last week, we looked at something very critical on ARC. It's LAIOS, on Amoge Radio Communications, leveraging artificial intelligence for organizational strategy. The title of our program last week was Using Artificial Intelligence for Competitive Advantage, right? Using artificial intelligence as a driver of competitive advantage. And we looked at the hybrid way. I repeat, artificial intelligence as a driver of competitive advantage, the hybrid way. We said last week that AI's ability to process high volume, high velocity, and high variety data helps you as an organization to gain a competitive advantage. I repeat, artificial intelligence's ability to process high volume, high velocity, and high variety data helps you as an organization to gain competitive advantage, right? However, AI alone won't give you the competitive advantage. AI enables you to gain competitive advantage, but AI alone won't give you competitive advantage, right? So what exactly can you do with AI, that can give you that competitive advantage? AI can help you access, and process massive data sets. However, that data set that is available to you is simultaneously available to your competition, right? So you must now have, like a chef with a recipe, you must now have, a strategy for combining and utilizing that information and that ability to process data, speedily in a manner that is unique to your organization. That processing recipe, so to say, is what can give you the competitive advantage, right? So AI will give you a massive amount of information. AI will give you an incredible pace in terms of speed, right? However, you as the human must still provide the prompting, even the data prompts, as well as the overall human leadership, and that's the hybrid way, right? So AI, of course, can give you the sense of a strategic direction. Like, you look at the data, you look at the trends, you look at trends analysis, it gives you a sense. You use predictive analytics, which we've talked about 2 episodes ago, and prescriptive analytics to also, forecast the markets, do, simulation, you simulate scenarios, and so on and so forth, right? However, even with all of that, you as the human, sometimes you still have to fit the strategic direction that you are anticipating into the artificial intelligence tools. AI can then process the likelihood of that direction being effective, and AI can also test your assumptions. AI can help to simulate the conditions in a manner that is significantly faster and much more efficient than you can do as a human, right? We also said that you are going to need human intelligence to process the massive amount of information that is available to all, including your competitors, in a manner which is different from your competition, to gain competitive advantage through things like speed, which comes from machines focus. I'm going to say that again. You are going to need human intelligence to process the massive amount of information that's available to everyone, including your competition, in a manner which is different from your competitors, in order to gain competitive advantage through things like speed, which comes from machines' focus. We now said that perhaps the reason why machines have that amount of speed that humans have not attained and will probably not attain is because machines have, what you may want to call, and permit my tautology, a machine-like focus. You set them in a direction and they largely stay on that direction, right? So maybe humans could have had that speed, but for autonomy and creativity, and that is part of the strength of human intelligence. Because humans have autonomy and creativity, they are not likely to continue in a particular direction with that machine-like focus, and that is not necessarily a weakness. It's because of that strength that humans could create artificial intelligence in the first instance. Humans explore. Now I'm not saying machines don't explore, but even when they explore, it's because humans program them to explore, and they'll often explore in the directions that humans have set them on. But machines can stay focused, while humans tend to explore much more intuitively and much more, comprehensively. And that is not necessarily a weakness, it's a strength, right? Now, that strength is part of what we are going to talk about today, still combining that strength with artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence, of course, has the ability to process information in a manner that unearths patterns and associations that you may not be able to get from traditional methods. So because of that, AI helps you to understand your customer trends and preferences by unlayering information, in an accelerated manner, in a comprehensive way, with more nuances, right? Remember, AI is about having machines behave with human-like intelligence, right? So because AI can unlayer patterns of information in massive data sets, right, they can now give differentiated customer value propositions. They can help you create differentiated customer value propositions, which are difficult for you to, come up with if you are using traditional models, right? And the reason why they can do this is because they tend to be able to use that systems, that's artificial intelligence systems, that are capable of continuous learning. Right. Now, this is where we are going to put a cap in the highlights of last week's episode. And please, like I said, subscribe to Amoge Radio Communications on YouTube and invite others. Even if you have, listened to this before, also go back to listen to it again, because we are going to connect these things and proceed from there. So while we looked at using artificial intelligence to drive competitive advantage last week, and we focused on the hybrid way, continuing from where we stopped in terms of differentiation as one of the competitive advantages that AI provides, we are going today to discuss using artificial intelligence for innovation. I repeat, using artificial intelligence for innovation. Remember, last week we stopped on, or one of the things we talked about last week is differentiation. Now, one of the advantages that AI provides is differentiation, and that was the last highlight I just spoke to. Now, this differentiation is not differentiation for differentiation's sake. The differentiation is supposed to lead to innovation. The differentiation is capable of getting into the realm of innovation. If you remember last week, we talked about the reason why you need to differentiate is because you cannot charge a premium if you are providing the exact same services that your competitors are providing. It just becomes a perfect competitive market, like economists would say, and that means that there's homogeneity of goods and services, and therefore there is also similarity of prices. Yes, there are buyers and there are sellers, but there's also common prices because there's no differentiation. But the moment you begin to provide value-added services, which AI can help you to create by giving you better insights into your customer, helping you to understand your customer's trends and preferences, then you can begin to create unique value-added services, and these value-added services can help you to charge a premium. Now, that differentiation is one level. At another level, it becomes innovation. So today we want to talk about using artificial intelligence for innovation, right? Generally, traditional analytical methods will give you the kind of pattern recognition that is limited, right? But artificial intelligence beyond traditional analytical methods will take you to the realm of pattern recognition and correlation, where you'll be able to gain deeper understanding right? Remember here, you're talking about machine intelligence. You're also talking about deep machine learning, beg your pardon. You're also talking about deep learning, where you uncover the neural network, so to say, of unstructured data, right? Because when you say that artificial intelligence can process large amounts of data, many times this massive data come in an unstructured form. But artificial intelligence, because it is capable of behaving like human intelligence, now begins to help you to draw the correlations and patterns. In other words, begins to provide structure to unstructured data. So remember again, the reason why you are innovating, part of the reason why you are innovating is to solidify your competitive position if you already have one through differentiation, or to begin to have a strong competitive advantage if you do not already have one, right? But the innovation often comes from an understanding of the market, an understanding of customer needs, an understanding of trends. These things, even the environmental trends that impact your market, these things are gotten much more easily through artificial intelligence, because of the ability of artificial intelligence to go beyond the capability of traditional analytical methods and to give you the kind of pattern recognition and identification of correlations that will now help you to begin to gain the advantage of differentiation and elevate it to the realm of innovation. I remain your host, Tolu Omodara, here on Amoge Radio Communications, and today on this program, Leveraging Artificial Intelligence for Organizational Strategy, we are looking specifically at using artificial intelligence for innovation. Now, there's something I want us to know when it comes to innovation. By the way, just so you know, I did 2 whole quarters on innovation. At least there was a program called Developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity. Please catch up on the program. It was a whole quarter where we talked about using innovation for absorptive capacity. Absorptive capacity there meaning the ability to ensure that you're using innovation to gain economic and competitive advantage, so that it's not just innovation for innovation's sake. And one of the things I emphasized on that particular program, that quarter-long program, is that creativity is not innovation. Innovation includes creativity, but goes way beyond creativity. Creativity is the inspiration. Creativity is the ability to do something new. But when you talk about innovation, it includes the process of turning creativity to profitability. And when we say using artificial intelligence for innovation, we are not just talking about using artificial intelligence for creativity. We're talking about using artificial intelligence to ensure that you gain full advantage, full competitive advantage from creative efforts going on in your organization. Of course, it begins by identifying the opportunities for creativity, which is what we talked about last week when we talked about differentiation generally. But using artificial intelligence for innovation, it's about creating entire innovation systems for your organization that helps you move from creativity to profitability, beginning with the identification of market gaps, right? Oftentimes when you talk about value addition, it begins with market gaps. I'll give you an example. For instance, at a point, people would use devices, right? They'll use technological devices, and to a very large extent, they were still restrictive. And people saw that, the creator saw that there was a need for things. When I say restrictive, in terms of the weight, right? Of course, this is not the 90s when we had desktops. We now had laptops. But I think in the early 2000s, there was still a need for something lighter. There was a market gap. Then came creativity. Tablets were born, right? And from tablets, we now moved on even further to even more sleek models, right? That is creativity born out of market gap analysis. These days, artificial intelligence is capable of helping you analyze that massive unstructured data to identify the market gaps, the customer needs, and there are so many ways to do this. Something as simple as surveys, right? Customer surveys, getting that information. It can, even if it's in a structured manner, artificial intelligence is still capable of processing it in a much more nuanced way. What I mean by nuance there is that you are programming artificial intelligence to identify exploitable market gaps for innovation. Because innovation begins with identifying a need, right? If you are doing something that has already been done in exactly the same way it has been done before, that is not innovation. So the first thing you want to find out is, where are the gaps in the market? Where are the gaps in the customer's needs, wants, and preferences? And artificial intelligence helps you to process massive amounts of information, whether in structured or unstructured forms, in a manner that helps you to glean the required insight that gives you a sense of the market gaps, which are actually opportunities for innovation. Let's talk about something else. When you talk about artificial intelligence as a tool for innovation, right? Using artificial intelligence for innovation. One thing we have to understand is that market trend predictions, right, often deals with historical data, which is fine, right? But like we said 2 episodes ago, we need to move beyond the analysis of the past trends analysis to predictive analytics. But predictive analytics often uses historical data. On the basis of historical data, you can then begin to identify or predict, determine, or anticipate what the future could be like. But what about outliers? In research, you talk about outliers. Let me give an example. 2008 was not a year that followed the norm. That was the year where we had the global economic recession, if you remember, where the stocks went flat in New York and impacted the whole world, right? That was not a typical year. So if you're trying to use only historical data to predict that a gap in the market, because it later created a gap and led to opportunities for some, you might not exactly be current, right? You might not exactly be accurate, you might not exactly be comprehensive and robust. So where does artificial intelligence help? Artificial intelligence can also be used to even identify the outliers. Let me give you an example. In the year 2020, there was COVID, there was the pandemic, there was the era redefining pandemic, if I can put it that way. The COVID redefined the entire era. The era we are in is described as the post-pandemic era. That was the extent to which COVID redefined an era. And even though it was an outlier, because we've not had a pandemic in decades, however, it also been identified that pandemics tended to happen once in every 100 years. So the truth is that somewhere in the body of data, you can identify even the outliers. And those outliers give you great room for innovation. Let me give an example. Let's imagine, and I'm not saying this, I'm not implying that pandemic was a positive thing, but let's imagine that someone was able to see that, okay, we are likely to have an outlier in the year 2020 based on, what we've seen about the trends of outliers in terms of the frequency of occurrence, right, and the time of occurrence. Such an organization or such a leader would probably have positioned their organization to take full advantage of the pandemic, i.e. Zoom. I don't know if those who leverage off these to provide virtual meeting tools, virtual meeting technologies, I don't know if they anticipated it, but they definitely cashed in it. So innovation, is still about data, and even the outliers can be programmed. Outlier recognition of outliers, the likelihood, the tendency, the frequency, even as infrequent as it may appear to be, there is still a certain structure to that unstructured data, and on layering the structure to the unstructured data, so to say, is what artificial intelligence can be programmed to do in a manner that is much more faster than human intelligence, of course still being led by human intelligence. I hope you are enjoying this. I remain your host, Tolu Omodara, here on Amogate Radio Communications. Today we are looking at using artificial intelligence for innovation, and we are beginning with the identification of market gap, which often creates the basis for innovation. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back shortly. Hold your breath while we continue this very interesting and necessary conversation.
Amogate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Amogate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts expert in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmorgate.org or call +234 810 999 6666, +234 807 957 4151, and +161 0504 6026. www.thearmorgate.org. Armorgate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
Welcome back. This is still Tolu Amadara here on Amogate Radio Communications, welcoming you very warmly to today's edition of Leveraging Artificial Intelligence for Organizational Strategy on Amogate Radio Communications. And today's topic is using artificial intelligence for innovation. I will be speaking a lot to identification of market gaps. Now, I was speaking to deep learning the other time, especially because, like I said, innovation begins with identifying market gaps. Identifying market gaps begins with looking at the previous data, looking at the massive amounts of data, but on layering the unfamiliar patterns. Last week, we started talking about this, the ability of artificial intelligence to identify patterns. Pattern recognition is very, very critical to identifying those market gaps that serve as the basis for innovation. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning have gone beyond mere automation to stimulating innovation. Automation is one thing. Automation is putting, developed processes that you have already developed, putting them in an auto mode, right? That's automation. But innovation is about creating altogether new processes, and that is very, very important. It's about creating strategic models that did not exist before in your industry. Those are the disruptive levels of innovation where you create an altogether new market. Let me give you an example. In Nigerian banking industry, for a very long time, there had been what you may want to call the established banks, right? Different ones, very, very established, right? And they came with, some charges, and before long, here came the disruptors. They decided to introduce the much more flexible market systems. You probably heard of M-Pesa in Kenya. They came with another kind of model that was less of brick and mortar, that was much more digital, and brought down charges significantly. Believe me, the so-called traditional established banks are currently having to rethink their model because a new strategic model emerged and the banking public largely caught on to it. I'm not saying the traditional banking organizations still don't have their place, but something is definitely happening in that market. How do they identify this data? How do they identify the market gaps? Surveys. How was this customer survey processed? It was processed much more efficiently using tools like artificial intelligence. So when you are talking about innovation, it's beyond automation. Like I said, automation is taking known processes and putting them on an auto mode. But innovation is sometimes about creating entirely new strategic models. And these can be very good because if you do it well, you will have the first mover advantage, right? And once you are having the first mover advantage, you are probably able to capture a sizable portion of the market early. And if you maintain customer satisfaction, you are likely to cement your position for a long time to come, right? But those insights into what the customer lacks, what the customer needs, which become the basis for innovation, often come more easily. The insights often come more easily through things like deep learning that enhances pattern recognition. Another thing that artificial intelligence does that helps us move to the realm of innovation quickly is that it helps to orchestrate algorithmic development. Last week, I was talking about that it's still the responsibility of human intelligence to prompt algorithms, to design algorithms, to indicate the kind of algorithmic compositions they want. Now, how does artificial intelligence help with algorithmic development, helping systems to thus learn from data and enhance performance in a manner that is repeatable? One of the things is that artificial intelligence, remember, using data, can learn from what is working and what is not working much more speedily than human intelligence, right? So when you're talking about algorithmic development, we are trying to program our algorithms. Remember, you still want to know what is not working, you want to know what is necessary, you want to look at previous algorithms. In fact, to be honest with you, sometimes you also want to gather competition intelligence. What kind of algorithms, of course, the manner that is ethical, what kind of algorithms are your competitions using, right? What has been working? What is prevalent in the market? And you want to match this with customer needs. Today, I'm focusing a lot on unearthing customer needs. Sometimes the richest bank of innovation data are those customer feedback. Very, very important, right? What is the customer saying? What are the customer surveys indicating? What are the areas of deepest or most recurring dissatisfaction in a particular industry? Look at what the customers are saying. If you can get intelligence, like I said, competition intelligence, ethically, of course, you want to look at the gaps in your present and potential competitions service, right? Where are the customers dissatisfied? And when you use deep learning and machine learning, but not just machine learning, but deep learning that unearths those patterns in probably structured or semi-structured data and unearths them in a manner that helps you recognize the patterns, then you can then begin to use those insights that you have garnered to create new innovation-based models, right? Innovation leading offerings, right? To say, okay, what can we do differently? What can we offer the customer that is different from what competition is currently offering them, right? So artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, that enable pattern recognition, helps the system to learn from data and helps the system to probably even, remember what we said about predictive analytics, probably even create new models and also simulate those scenarios, right? Because innovation is also a process. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that are repeated in those programs. Remember, developing national innovation systems absorptive capacity is a program that we already did some quarters ago, and it's a quarter-long program. So I'm not going to repeat what I've said about innovation, but one thing I want to reference for the sake of today's episode is that when you talk about innovation, there's usually a process, and it includes experimentation, right? You don't want to scale up without first experimenting, and that's where execution comes in. Now, how does artificial intelligence help with the experimentation phase of innovation? It helps through things like prescriptive analytics, right? That's where you talk about scenarios, simulation, right? You don't necessarily have to test the market in the most inefficient manner. Artificial intelligence can help you to reduce the cost of market testing in a very significant way, such that you can test many scenarios as efficiently as possible and in a manner that helps you to move faster along the ladder of innovation. I'm going to share one or two more ways in which we can use artificial intelligence for innovation, and then we'll wrap up for today. Now, artificial intelligence has enhanced analytical capability, and this can help you to also have dynamic market responsiveness. I'll say that again. Artificial intelligence has enhanced analytical capability. We talk pattern recognitions, deep neural networks, uncovering those things. All of those are still part of its enhanced analytical capacity. But this can lead to dynamic market responsiveness. Last week we talked about decision latency. Decision latency there meaning if you're not careful, the lack of speed or the lack of a timeliness in taking advantage of information and insights that have been provided. But artificial intelligence can help you to gain that information, and especially the insights of the information through this enhanced analytical capability more speedily, and that way you are likely to act on your direction quickly before the market changes in a fundamental way. Now, of course, you already know that we live in a VUCA world. It's very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and the pace of change is faster than anything we've ever seen before. We've said this a couple of times on this program already. So what do you want to do? You want to be responsive, even in your innovation offerings, because certain things that may be innovative today may already be the way of life in another 1 year. right? 2 years ago, I doubt if we're talking about generative AI. I'm very sure in 2021, 22, we're not talking about generative AI. Even though we're talking about AI, we're not yet talking about generative AI, right? So what happened, right? The market changed fundamentally, or the market changed significantly. And so if you were not quick to take advantage of an innovation that you had, an innovative idea, a creative idea that you had with regards to generative AI, in the days of DeepSeek, you may no longer have the competitive advantage, because what was innovation 3 years ago has become a way of life in 2025. So the enhanced analytical capability of artificial intelligence should help you have dynamic and prompt market responsiveness. That way, you can quickly get into the market your innovative ideas before innovation becomes perfectly competitive markets. Remember, don't have value-added services to a large extent. You have homogeneity of products and services, and therefore there is also very minimal price differentiation. I think lastly, I'm going to talk about the ability to have differentiated customer experiences, right? And therefore, you can also have entirely new avenues for value creation. I'll say that again. You can also have the ability to have differentiated customer experiences. We talked about differentiation, but now, like last week, we talked about differentiation, but we are going to beyond differentiation this week to say you can go from there to create completely new avenues for value creation, right? You can create completely new models, but you can also have value creation based on customer segmentation, right? I was giving the example of the banking industry in Nigeria some minutes ago. Now, those traditional banks, can begin to say, okay, we have different kinds of customers with different kinds of needs. We are not going to assume that all our customers like this traditional banking model. What has now become traditional banking model, it wasn't traditional some decades ago. What if we begin to have banks within a bank, if I can put it that way? What if we begin to have different kinds of customer value creation offerings that create value for a particular segment of our customers? Right? So artificial intelligence, again, using deep learning, using its enhanced analytical capacity, artificial intelligence can help you, go into the nuances of each customer, and that way you are providing the perfect menu for each customer. Every customer does not want exactly the same things, and if you're not careful, the inability to differentiate customer needs and to provide differentiated services, value creation based on customer segmentation can cost you not just your innovative capability, but in the process also lost opportunities for increased profitability. Wow. I think this is where we are going to stop on today's edition of the program. We're going to continue next week on using artificial intelligence for innovation. How do we use all of the strength of artificial intelligence, the deep learning, the enhanced analytical capability, the pattern recognition, and so on and so forth? How do we use these things to, go to the realm of innovation? What exactly is innovation? Maybe we are going to talk a little bit more about what innovation is next week, right? We'll just reference it, like I said, because we already have 2 whole programs on innovation that you can check out on Amoge Radio Communication. Well, on this note, I want to invite you once again to partner with us in Amoge. We look forward to helping you to create innovative business models. We want to invite you to let us work with you to understand how to use artificial intelligence to spot these gaps in the market that you can leverage for your innovation advantage, right? We can help you to create innovation processes. We can help you to even develop innovation strategies that are connected to artificial intelligence, that can leverage artificial intelligence for innovation. This is our strength, right? This is what we have proven capabilities in. We can also bring learning to your organization. We have programs on innovation. We can take your senior management abroad, away from their base, and have, programs, 5-day long programs on developing innovation systems for organizational leverage. We can help them to have such programs for 3 days if you want. Give them retreat and make sure that they walk away from such programs with an organizational strategy that will ensure that you are using artificial intelligence for innovation, even for disrupting your market if need be, all to give you, the advantage of innovation. Like I said, innovation goes way beyond creativity, and we can help you to also use artificial intelligence to develop and to design and develop optimal innovation systems and processes. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It's been a delight discussing using artificial intelligence for innovation with you, and I look forward to being back same time, same station next week, and we're going to continue this very necessary conversation using artificial intelligence for innovation. Until then, remember, you can check us out on www.theamoge.org. You can send us the mail on contact@theamoge.org. You can follow us on all our social media handles: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can fill our contact form. You can let us know. You can reach us for our training arm. We have a whole training arm where we can come and support you and equip your people with all of these capabilities that are sine qua non critical for success in the 21st century. Thank you very much again for doing this with us. I'll be back same time, same station next week by God's grace. Until then, I remain Tolu Omodara. Keep thinking innovation and using artificial intelligence for enhanced innovative capabilities. See you next week and have a beautiful month of November. God bless you.